So, like I said, I love putting these events together, and I'm so excited for today's topic, because it's a topic that I have personally struggled with at moments in my life, as well as 16 million other people in the UK and 30% of the population in the US, and that is insomnia. And so I'm excited to invite Heather Darwall-Smith, who is a London-based sleep psychotherapist, to speak on the topic of overcoming insomnia using CBTi and mindfulness psychotherapy. And so a little bit about Heather. Heather is currently working towards a postgraduate diploma in sleep science at the University of Oxford. And she holds a diploma in counseling and psychotherapy from Bath Center for Psychotherapy and Counseling. She has also completed training in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and trauma assessment under Babbitt Rothschild. Alongside her work as a sleep therapist at the London Sleep Center, Heather runs a private psychotherapy practice in Oxford, and she specializes in issues such as trauma. Sorry, something happened to my screen. Let's see what happened here. I think
Nothing.
I think for some reason, I think somebody is screen sharing. Someone is sharing your screen. If you could please, I don't know how that is happening. Let's see. Heather, that's not your screen, is it?
No, it says someone called Terence Horan.
Yeah.
Okay. Terence, would you be able to stop sharing your screen for us, please?
Okay, just a minute.
Okay.
Well, whatever it is, you reckon it.
All right. Let me double check.
I've lost the whole thing. It just says Zoom United.
Yeah.
I can't get it to go back. Just,
Yeah.
I'm not on anybody's line.
Video too, right? I'm just
As-
in.
As a host, if you go into your settings, you should be able to disable anybody from sharing except
Okay.
your co-host.
Let's see.
All mine says is Zoom bundled.
Okay. Let me double
Can't
check.
get out of it.
Okay.
Try
Okay.
leaving.
Parents, are you able to stop sharing your screen?
I'm not I'm really not computer savvy, so
Okay,
Okay.
that's okay.
Button in
I
the
think I got
middle.
it.
There you go.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah, everything's good. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but we're back in. All right, cool. So I'm going to finish off. So as I said, so Heather specializes in issues such as trauma and PTSD, and particularly how they can present as challenges to our sleep. And Heather is also coming out with a book called The Science of Sleep, which I'm super excited to announce, and we'll be also talking about that as well. So without further ado, welcome Heather, and thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm so excited to get this conversation started.
Yeah. And I tried to move my head. Yeah.
And yeah, Heather, I would love for us to just start off with you. Something that I always love to ask the guests when they first come on is, how do you define being healthy? I know that's kind of a big question, but I think each person has their own perspective on it, and I would love to also hear yours as well.
Gosh, well, thank you so much for having me, and hello to everyone. It's really excellent seeing the people saying in the chat where they're from, and it's incredible to know that there's people here from all over the world tonight, this morning, wherever you are in the world. What makes me know that I'm healthy? I would say it's when I'm able to be present, when I'm able to just enjoy things for as they are, how they are, without worrying about what's gone on before, what's coming up. Just being here, I think, is when I know that, yeah, I'm okay. because then I know that my nervous system is very settled. I know that there's nothing uncomfortable in my body. It's about being here, right now, and not having to think about anything else. Everything's joined up. Everything's just working.
Yeah, I completely connect with that. So in the topic of today, we're talking about sleep and insomnia. And I think something that I'd love to just start off with is the science of sleep, and particularly in the brain, and like what's happening in the brain when we go through the sleep wake cycle. And if you could talk about a little bit about that, that would be a really good way to start off, I think.
It's really interesting because there's still so much we don't know about sleep, but sleep science research is just exploding. You know, in the last 50 years, it's gone from a very, very niche discipline and just exploded into every aspect of research. And the activity, the stuff they're finding out about the brain is incredible, because we used to think we go to sleep and then we're unconscious and nothing happens. And actually now we know that sleep for the brain is a very, very active time. And as we're falling asleep, we go through a series of brain states. So right now, while we're sitting here now, our brain is in a very active, awake sort of state. It's in, the wavelengths are running at a frequency called beta. And as we start to go down into sleep, the brain is starting to shift. So that first stage of sleep, we're in this alpha state, which is sort of like a meditation type state, where we have some awareness and we know a little bit about what's going on in the world. And then we drop down into a theta state, which is very, very slow, relaxed, but again, some ability to connect with what's going on externally. And then we drop right down into a delta state, which is where we're in deep sleep. And then all through the night, we cycle up and down through these different states. But there's constant change. So when we come up into a state of sleep, which is called Rem sleep, where we dream, that's a very active brain state. We're in a beta state like we are now, so it can feel very conscious. So probably about 50 or 60% of our night asleep is spent in quite an alert brain state, but we're under consciousness. So it can sometimes feel a little bit like waking. But one of the things that's, I think, one of the most exciting pieces of research that came out, I think it was in 2012, a team in, I'm trying to think where they are, I think they're in the US, found that during sleep, the brain does something specific. It washes the brain out of particular proteins called tau and beta amyloid. And it's called the lymphatic system. And what happens during sleep is that the fluid from the spine comes up into the brain and sort of pulses and flushes all of these proteins out. And that happens particularly in deep sleep. And it's believed that that is the particular activity that flushes out waste and these proteins, some of which are said to contribute towards Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative disorders. So it's a very busy brain state activity all the way through the night. And you could sort of say, well, once we're offline, like our conscious state is offline, all the energy that the brain is putting into having us awake is then turned into what happens when we're asleep. So the brain needs us to get out of the way, because it needs to do what it needs to do to get all the body systems back up and running for our next day.
But then sometimes where is it that insomnia starts to kick in? So at some point there's something happening in the brain that doesn't allow us to, or that wakes us up from being able to go through that process. And then also, I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later, about how sleep deprivation can actually affect the body.
Yeah, so insomnia, I mean, the way that the brain activity changes. So typically there's different types of insomnia. So we have difficulty getting to sleep, we'd have difficulty staying asleep, or we're waking up too early. And the American Academy of Sleep Medicine defines insomnia as persistent difficulty with sleep initiation, falling asleep, duration, staying asleep, consolidation, all in one place, or quality, whether you're getting the different cycles of sleep. And whatever it is that causes us to not be able to go to sleep or not stay asleep is a very complex dynamic. You have to rule out whether there are any physical or neurological conditions in place. So I think the figures are something like 30% of people who are diagnosed with insomnia actually suffer from obstructive sleep apnea. So that's something that you discover if you do a sleep study, and then if you sleep with someone, you'll tend to know because they tend to snore. But someone who has apnea may not know that they have it. So they may think that their poor sleep is poor sleep, but actually it's apnea, which is a treatable condition. So once we rule everything out of the way, you're then into a territory of, well, is it anxiety or is it insomnia? Is it that I've got too much stress in my life and my body's in hyperarousal, so it's very difficult for me to go to sleep? Or what is it? So it's very difficult to really pinpoint it sort of on the nail. This is what's happening, which is partly why it's very tricky to deal with.
Yeah. And how is it that people are able to distinguish what is anxiety or what is trauma and what is actually real insomnia? Or is that even is that even a thing? Is there such thing as real insomnia, or is there always an underlying factor behind that?
Well, if we take out the words trauma or anxiety or insomnia, if we think about how the body works, and we think about, so if we imagine ourselves like a bottle of fizzy drink, and if you shake up that bottle of drink, all the bubbles inside that are the stress hormones. So that's cortisol and adrenaline. And the more you shake it up, the more pressure is in the body. So if you've got a very hectic life or there's distress going on, then naturally the body is going to be shaken up. There's going to be a lot of pressure. So I like to think about it as that's what stress is. That's what anxiety is, that there's so much pressure in the system that when it comes to bedtime or during the night, you open that bottle all in one go and it's just everywhere. There's so much buildup in the system that we try then to go to sleep. So is it therefore, when you open that bottle, that is insomnia? Is what the pressure is that's in the body, is that trauma or is that anxiety? The body isn't telling you, it's just experiencing the impact of the stress response. It's running itself round and round in circles, but as to why, that's the psychological reason and story for it is something different. But biologically, it feels like this buildup that's in the system that interrupts the sleep-wake cycle.
And is there a reason why this sort of, like you said, when you shake it and it kind of just all explodes, why is it that it happens in night particularly? Is there a reason for that?
I think during the day, we're able to occupy ourselves really well. We're busy, life's going on, there's lots happening. But at night, there's nothing else to do. So suddenly we're into, right, actually, I've got to get into bed and there's nothing else we can do. And the brain goes, oh, hello, I haven't thought about that all day. Now I'm going to think about it. Now I've got time to think about it. It's almost like this landscape opens up and the body goes, right, hello, or the brain's going, right, okay, now you're going to process all that stuff because you've blocked it away during the day. You haven't had time to look at it. So now it's like, oh, what's going on? So I think it's really interesting to think about it also as the idea of when you go to bed, it's all, some people describe it as a performance anxiety. It's like, right, I've got to go to bed, I've got to go to sleep. So let's see, you're lying there, it's like, right, now I've got to go to sleep. Yeah. And actually that's really difficult for sleep because sleep doesn't want to perform. It will do it on its own. And the more we try and do it, the more it's like, no, I like to think of sleep as this being. It's like, come on. And the sleep will go, no, I'm coming on my terms, not yours.
That's so true when you think about it. And I feel like the more pressure we put on ourselves that we need to fall asleep, it becomes a vicious cycle. And it's just almost like this sort of negative loop that we kind of put ourselves in at that point. But with anxiety, so we're looking at this with the kind of viewpoint of anxiety. And then when it comes to trauma and PTSD, I think from my assumption is trauma and PTSD could really cause or have this sort of onset of chronic insomnia, and then versus acute insomnia. Could you kind of talk about the differences between chronic and acute, and maybe the underlying reasons as to what might lead one to having chronic insomnia versus acute insomnia?
So I think there's three aspects to respond to in that. So I'll look at acute and then chronic and then trauma and PTSD. So acute insomnia is almost normal. It's a bad night, a one-off. An acute response is when the stress process goes up, does what it needs to do, and comes down and comes through. It literally goes up, meets the challenge, comes down, then comes back down to homeostasis where the body's able to relax. And it's very powerful and we need it, and it's not all bad, because actually, if we're going to get up the mountain that day, we need acute stress. It's a positive stressor. So the stress response is responding to threat, perceived or real, and therefore it puts the body on alert. And so, yeah, you may have a bad night because the body's going, right, what do I need to do? I need to check this out. Is it okay? So that's acute insomnia is very temporary, very natural, and a response to activation. And very normal. I mean, I every now and then have a bad night, and you could call that acute insomnia. So it's a short-term problem which passes. It tips into chronic insomnia. I think the diagnostic criteria is, I think it's after 3 months, when it keeps going, sort of more than 3 days a week for 3 months, then you're into chronic insomnia, is when the stressor has passed, or maybe not, but the system hasn't come back all the way back down to homeostasis. It hasn't relaxed. So you're back up here in the sort of constant hum, which is chronic. So it's ongoing. Or there may be stresses in your life. It's an ongoing scenario. So this is the difference between acute, sudden, chronic, ongoing. And ongoing insomnia, chronic insomnia, is something that's really tricky to deal with, because we then start to have behaviors where we're trying to sort it out. So we talk about insomnia with looking at it from 3 Ps. So we have things that are we predisposed for insomnia? So there are genetic aspects. There more women than men have insomnia. There's lots of reasons why we might be predisposed. Then we have the precipitating factor, the trigger. We might never know what the trigger is, but you could call that the acute period. And then we have the perpetuating behaviors, the things that keep it going. And that's where we sit in chronic insomnia, because it's whatever's keeping this thing going, keeps going. And quite often, a lot of the behaviors that we have, naturally, of course, to try and fix it, make it harder. I mean, we are humans. We like to fix things, and that's why we're so successful as a race, because we move forward, we fix. But actually, a lot of this starts to create pressure, which exacerbates insomnia and keeps it going. So the question about trauma and PTSD, trauma, of course, puts the body into a state of hyperarousal. It can also go into hypoarousal, where it's a low arousal below. So they're 2 different processes, but the body is responding to threat, whether it's real or perceived, and whether it's now or before. And PTSD is an accelerated version of that. The body doesn't actually know that it's here, right now. Trauma is similar, but PTSD will pull you backwards and forwards from that's what happened then, and the body will go straight back, and it's like literally reliving it. Very similar territories, but you work with them in different ways.
That's very interesting. And so I'm going to go back on what you said. You spoke about the behaviors that people typically have, or the behaviors that people somehow embody basically when they're feeling this sort of pressure when it comes to insomnia. What are some of those behaviors? What does that look like?
People come in and see me and they'll tell me about a very elaborate sleep routine that they have. Mm-hmm. And that they're very rigid, they're very attached to it. And they say, I can't go on holiday, I can't go out for the evening, I've got to be home in time to perform this routine. And it becomes very controlling. So I think some of those behaviors tend to be, it's a very rigid, almost, it becomes quite obsessional as to if I get home and I turn the lights down at 10 and I have a bath and then I do this and then I do this and then I do this and then I'm ready to go to bed. But actually it's that rigidity makes it very difficult, because it makes it very difficult to live with, because you then start cutting away at life experiences. It's like you're out for dinner with friends and you're looking at your watch going, oh, I've got to go home because I've got to perform my sleep routine. But unfortunately, when people get to me, it's like, this isn't working. Yeah. So we have to start to unpick and come backwards as to, right, okay, how do we get some breathing space around this? How do we flex a little bit so that you're not reliant on this very, very tough scaffolding, which ultimately can become a little bit of a trap.
Yeah, definitely. And even when it comes to associating yourself with the bedroom, when you enter into that sort of trap, the moment that you, like you said, you turn the lights out down, it's time to go to bed. But if you have something like chronic insomnia, your brain, or you start to associate that with insomnia. And what are some of the suggestions that you have when it comes to that? Because that kind of feels like something that would be really difficult to kind of get out of.
Yeah, it is. So, what I regularly hear is people say, as it starts to get dark, I'm watching the clock. And so they're watching the clock, it's nearly bedtime, and the anxiety is starting to build because now I've got to do it again. I've got to go to that place. I've got to do it again. Very difficult. And people do tell me that it's like a form of torture. Which is a very strong word for something that is a biological, natural process, that actually going to sleep is this torture. So what we look at doing with that, there's two aspects to that. One, I will ask someone to cut the amount of time they're in bed. So we'll look to work with sleep restriction, because what often happens is that people increase the time in bed so that they can try and get more sleep. But actually it's really counterintuitive, because it's giving the body all this time. It's like, I've got 10 hours. Like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go here, I'm going to go there. And actually we want to make sure that this is your sleep window, and we want to get you tired so that we're pushing through this. We also want to look at, and I've just noticed someone's put in the chat, overstimulation is a problem. It's a huge problem, because we have a very busy life and there's a lot going on. We often have a lot of screen time, and certainly the last year, for goodness sake, everything that's happened in the last year it's like this low hum of global anxiety that's there. So we get to bedtime, and so you've got the anxiety of, I'm going to go to bed. There's all this stuff going on. So it's all ratcheting up. So we need to think about, you're not going to spend as much time in bed as you thought you were going to do. And you're only going to go to bed when you're sleepy. And you're going to get up at the same time every day. So there's a very structured way of working with sleep restriction, where we work out how far down can we cut your sleep. And personally, never go below 6 hours. The protocol is 5.5 hours, but I think that's a very hard way to live with it. And certainly if you have a job where you're driving or doing something mechanical, you have to think carefully about sleep restriction. But we want to cut the chance of worrying. So we're going to make you tired, we're getting a structure in place, and we're saying to your body, that's when you're going to sleep. The other exercise I do with people, so if you imagine you and I are sitting here and we're talking about your sleep. So what I'll say to you is, right, you and I are going to sit here now, and we're going to imagine you in your house, and we're going to watch you. So tell me about what you're doing as you walk around the house. And so I'll walk through that with someone as to, right, this is so, okay, you're doing that. If as you're watching Nadia now, what do you think she needs right now? How do you think you could step in to help her? So I want to work out a really observational position for you to take so you can watch what you're doing, so you can step out and watch what's going on. It's okay, what does she need now? So that when you're in that last couple of hours before bed, you can just remind yourself of that sort of, okay, what happens if I just pause for a moment and just watch? What's she doing? What does she need? To try and slow that process down and also come out of that highly activated state. So I've just noticed in the chat, someone's commented about mindfulness. Now, yes, I'm a mindfulness psychotherapist. And yes, it's very, very valuable. So coming into the now, being able to work with the breath, being able to just be very present. But we've talked about trauma and PTSD. So with PTSD, sometimes a mindfulness practice can be very tricky, because actually, why would I ask someone to sit in a mindful way when that could bring the activation up? So working with this observer stance helps to take you out, so you're able to step away a little bit, gives you a little bit more space between the experience of what is going on. Does that all hang together? Is that making sense?
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess another thing that I wanted to ask you is, when it comes to CBT, how is that kind of incorporated in the process?
So the CBTi is like a toolbox of things that we work with. And there is a structure. So if you access CBTi through an app or a book or something, there's a very structured approach. When I work directly with someone, I take the toolbox and then we manipulate depending on what that person needs, because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. If I say to you, I would like you to do 20 minutes of a relaxation exercise called progressive relaxation before bed, progressive muscle relaxation before bed, it might be something you don't like, doesn't work for you. But it's based on a series of factors. So the first piece is called sleep hygiene. And I have a real problem with the phrase sleep hygiene, because it's like, well, is that good? Clean sleep? It's like, I don't like it. Don't like it at all. So it's actually a set of recommendations about lifestyle, stress reduction. So we look at diet, we look at exercise, we look at caffeine usage, substance usage, environmental factors, noise. We look at all the aspects of what could be affecting sleep. And we look at education as to what constitutes normal sleep, because sleep changes as we go through life. So it's like, well, is there a perception challenge here? Do I think I need this much sleep when actually it could be this? Then so there's 5 aspects. So sleep hygiene. Then we work with cognitive therapy to help to reframe the thoughts, to think about what my thoughts are about my sleep, to try and find more positive ways to regard it. Like I say, for some people, it's a real place of fear. So how do we reframe that? How do we change that round? And that's very effective to take some of the frustration out of it. And through working with sleep hygiene, we can very much look at normalizing. So what should my sleep be? Do I have a huge expectation of myself that actually I'm never going to reach? When someone says to me, I need 8 hours sleep and I'm going to sleep solidly, I'm like, maybe you won't. That's actually very rare. Sleep is different every night. So when we get to know what sleep we need, then we're able to look at the thought processes around it. I've touched on sleep restriction. It's pretty hardcore to do, but it is clinically shown to be as effective as sleep medication. So it is one of the first line things that I would work with, to cut someone's time in bed and to put a real structure in place, because the body loves structure. likes to know where it stands. Then we look at relaxation strategies. It's really interesting, you know, there's so much emphasis in the world now on sleep, but actually for me, the most important thing is relaxation. We really need to focus on relaxation globally because we're all on the go all the time. So we expect a lot of our bodies. At what point are we going to really value relaxation and slowing down? So that's an aspect to what what I would look at with you. What is your relaxation? What do you do? And I would bet that many people on this call will say, I'm not sure. What do I really do to relax? So that's a big part of it. Can we work on relaxation and let sleep go over there and sort itself out a little bit more? And then we work with the fifth factor is stimulus control. And this is after 15, 20 minutes, if you've been lying in bed and you cannot get to sleep and you're not sleeping, you're wide awake, get out of bed.
Yes.
Don't put yourself through it. I mean, really don't do it to yourself. But if this is something that's happening to you, then we work through, right, what are you going to do if you get out of bed? Because if you get out of bed and you don't know what you're going to do, you're going to get very frustrated very quickly. There is nothing worse than being awake at 3 a.m. and feeling like you're the only person in the world who's awake and everyone else in your house is asleep and you're wide awake and you don't know what to do with yourself.
Yeah.
So I really recommend somewhere that you get out of bed, you've set something up and there's something there that you know what you're going to do. You've got some water there, you've got a blanket in case it's cold, you've got a book to read or a jigsaw puzzle, or one of the things that's been really incredible during lockdown is people have been playing building Lego. It's gone mad. Lego, the plastic bricks, because it's about distraction. It's about doing something else, and when you do something with your hands, you're distracting away from the mind. Relaxing, letting go of trying to go back to sleep. And when you feel a little bit sleepy again, go back again. Yeah, it may be you have a dodgy day the next day, but actually you're going to be okay. You will be okay. And if we can start to worry less about it, it will ease.
Yeah. And I think it's so difficult in today's world with how all of us are always on our phones and on our laptops. And I think that something that a lot of people who do struggle with insomnia, one of the first things that they do, waking up 3 o'clock in the morning, is they jump on their phone and they start scrolling through their emails or social media. And how does that blue light, for example, how does that affect us? How does that affect the brain? And yeah.
So rule number 1, no blue light between 11 and 4 a.m. Categorically don't do it, because you are basically shining a light into your brain and going, wake up. So the way it works is, so forgive if this gets too technical, shout. So in our brain, we have a small region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And we have 2 eyes, which are basically holes in the skull, which light goes through. And our eyes in the retina, they have particular cells called retinal ganglion cells, and they contain a protein called melanopsin. So those proteins are really sensitive to light, particularly to blue light. Very, very sensitive to blue light. So they're registering how much blue light it gets, and it sends a message to the suprachiasmatic nucleus to say, right, we're awake now. That's my job. I'm telling you we're awake. And different wavelengths of light have different effects. In the morning, we want blue light because that's what wakes us up. So that shows us how important that light is to waking. But in the evening, if we have a device, and we're doing this, we are literally shining light into the brain. If we're sitting on a Kindle or we're reading, this is literally telling the brain to wake up. It's as clear as that. It's absolutely crystal clear. But again, it's clear that that's what's going on, but it also depends how much blue light you've had that day. If you're someone who works outside all day, screen light at night you can have a little bit more, but you really do need to step away from the devices at between 11 and 4 a.m. Because the other aspect to it is it's stimulation. These devices, bless their cotton socks, are designed by geniuses to keep us occupied, to keep us scrolling. And that is stimulation, and that is setting the brain up with a bunch of cortisol and adrenaline to say, right, you're awake. So it's a triple threat. You've got your melatonin production is being turned off, which is sleepiness hormone, because that's what melanopsin does. There's cortisol going through the body, which is telling your body to wake up, turning off the melatonin. And you've got adrenaline, so the body's going, right, okay, I'm ready to go now. So it's one of those absolutely impossible situations. So if you have a long-term ongoing problem, this is something you need to take out of the mix. But I'll be really honest with you. Last year, I had a real bout of insomnia at the top of the lockdown here in the UK. And I'm very happy to admit that I would come downstairs, wrap myself in a blanket and watch Netflix. Because the TV is far enough away from my eyes. It's not ideal. There's stimulation. But the thing is, I know that I'm not going to worry about it. And I know that it's going to pass and it's not going to be a persistent problem. The odd night here or there, you know what? Don't torture yourself. Do something that is okay. But it's when it's ongoing that this becomes a real problem. If you were to get up every night and go downstairs and watch Netflix, you and I would be having quite a strict conversation.
Yeah. And then I saw a few people ask in the chat, what about the filters, the blue light filters, or even a Kindle? So I am a Kindle person. I will sometimes go on my Kindle if I'm having trouble sleeping. Do the blue light filters actually help? Or even the glasses, do those help? Or is there still some sort of issues that can happen there?
I've really looked at the research on this, and like everything sleep, there is no direct answer. Yes, I mean, there's been a really useful experiment going on with gamers, people who are professional gamers, and they wear blue light glasses because invariably their sleep is wrecked because they're on screens all the time. So they are using night filters and they are using the glasses, but the evidence is not clear. Because again, how do you measure the stimulation from the content versus the light? So it really, I can't give a straight answer. My preference is that you just don't do it if you've got an ongoing problem. A one-off here and there, not a problem, but ongoing, if there is a problem, this is something you would take out of the mix. But it's, I mean, it's a general thing. That's when the body needs to be asleep.
Yeah.
That's that. I mean, in between sort of 11 and 4, your body needs to be asleep. It doesn't want you to do anything else other than sleep. The other aspect of blue light. So right now during lockdown, we've all been on Zoom. I mean, my life is lived on Zoom. So if I'm then like 12 hours in front of a screen, that is too much blue light, way too much. So it's quantity as well. It's how much you've got is the problem. So if you've been outside all day and you come in and you've got a couple of hours in front of a screen, that's not likely to be too much of a problem, but it's the amount. It's the sheer amount of it that is a real problem. And it's this close to the eyes. That's where it's a problem.
Yeah. So true. And I mean, you talk about all of these other basically interventions or practices that we can use. So you talk about basically lifestyle changes and relaxation and diet, and using these as kind of tools to help us with insomnia. And so this is definitely more of a holistic sort of approach. And so what are your thoughts on more conventional methods, such as, having to take pharmaceuticals to assist with sleep?
They have their place. I'm not anti. Obviously, long term, it's not ideal.
Mhm.
But if someone comes into the sleep clinic and they haven't slept for a couple of weeks, they need a break. It's very difficult at that point to really actively work with a CBTi program if someone is that strung out.
Mhm.
So there are times, I mean, I'm not a medic, but I work with medics, and there are times where sleep medication absolutely has its place. But ideally, working without it is better because the body knows how to sleep. I mean, it's the absolute biological fact. If it didn't, then nature would have got rid of it by now.
Yeah.
We do know that the body will sleep. So yeah, medication when it's needed, prescribed by a professional as part of a plan, fine. Not anti at all, but it needs to be short term.
Mhm. Mhm. And then we have a lot of different healthcare professionals here, and a lot of them psychotherapists, counselors, social workers. And so, what are some of the things that they can do to support their clients who are currently working through insomnia?
I think the big thing that we can all work on is consistency. So really setting the same wake up time every morning. So say, for example, I'm someone who, and I think I work quite well between 7 and 7.5 hours sleep. The recommended amount of time for adults, recommended amount of sleep for adults is 7 to 9 hours. So if I'm thinking, right, okay, say I need 7 hours. So for me, that means if I were being really on it, I would be getting up at 7 and going to bed at midnight. But actually, for me, because I don't have a problem, I probably go to bed at 11 and I get up at 7.
Mhm.
But I get up at the same time every single day of the week. So it's about consistency.
Mhm.
Whatever it is we're doing to improve the situation has to be consistent and the same, and repetition. Because one of the things that often happens with insomnia, people go into panic. So they're going to try this, going to try that, going to try this, going to try that. And we strip it right down.
Mhm.
What are the core aspects that are working for you? And we keep it simple and we do it over and over and over again,
Mhm.
because that's what retrains the brain. That's neuroplasticity. So if you imagine you've got a flock of sheep and they're walking across a hill, and they will make a track on that hill because they keep doing the same thing. What we're talking about doing is putting a boulder on the path of those sheep, and the sheep have got to get there and go, I've got to do something different. So we're making that change, and the change feels uncomfortable. But very quickly, the more we do the same thing, we will get around it and it will start to work again. But it has to be consistent, routine based. And for me, the big one is getting up at the same time every day, getting as much light as possible, and moving first thing.
Mm.
Those three things are the bit when people say, can I flex at all? That's the thing. No, that's the one that I want you to do consistently all the time. But it's about, okay, looking at the big picture. What can you take out? What's the overwhelm? What are the factors here that you can control? What are the factors here you can't? And how do you work with those factors? Because we can't change everything. And then stripping it back and simplifying.
Yeah, that's really good advice. It's like really creating that routine and finding your own routine, because everyone's different, everyone's body is different. So I think some people say, I think a lot of people are constantly giving advice to people. Well, you should do this. This is the routine that you should set. But I think it's really important for you to find a routine that works for you and then stick with that if you can. Because I know that.
And it has to be personal. So when I meet a couple and I've got someone who will be someone who's a bit of a night owl and the other person isn't, it's like, right, okay, how are you two going to compromise? And how are you going to find your way? Because your sleep needs are different, and you need to take responsibility for your own sleep needs and prioritize your needs. So getting to know what you need. One of the things you can do is keep a sleep diary for a couple of weeks, and you start to look at patterns. Oh, maybe I'm not getting up at the same time. Maybe I'm going to bed at different times. Maybe I had that last cup of coffee late. What are the patterns you can see and the correlations with when your sleep isn't great? And when you work that piece, so when I'm working with people, we keep sleep diaries the whole time. What's going on? And we start to recognize, okay, That's what I need. Actually, I do quite well if I have that many hours, and that's what I do. But we all have different sleep needs. We have different ages, we have different gender. It's so personal. Sleep is such a personal thing.
Yeah, yes. Okay, so I'd love to, we have a few minutes left, so I want to answer all of your questions. I know there's quite a few questions, and go ahead and keep putting those in the chat as well if you do have anything. I'll try to scroll through some of these. One question was, what if you don't have a stressful or a hectic life but still can't sleep? And that's actually also something that I wanted to talk about, is there's more of like the biology behind that, and even the hormones, how your hormones affect your sleep. And yeah, like what are the other factors outside of trauma, PTSD, stress that can be causing these sleep issues?
So menopause, so for women, well, the whole way through life, for women, you have a continual shift of estrogen and progesterone. So it's very common for women to have sleep issues if they've got hormonal issues with their menstrual cycle or menopause, because when the progesterone levels drop, which tends to be 2 or 3 days before a period, progesterone is your sleepiness hormone, and that means that your sleep will be disrupted. And there's also pain in the mix. So it may be that you're not stressed, but actually you've got a chronic pain condition, and there will be something going on there. So it's just, you're not necessarily worried about it, but if you're not comfortable, if you're physically not comfortable, that's going to be a problem. So the hormonal aspect is really complicated. I'm not an endocrinologist. It is something that's very tricky to work with, but definitely for women, I think hormonal issues are significant. There are some endocrine disorders, so thyroid can cause problems, and I can never remember which way around it is. One, whether it's too high or too low, that disrupts sleep. There's another one, there's a hormone that's when we go to sleep, the brain switches on a hormone that stops the body going to the loo. So if there is a deficiency there, then you may be someone who needs to get up to go to the loo more often. So there's multiple, I mean, it's literally name a hormone and name the deficiency that will then affect the sleep-wake cycle.
Yeah. And also, just going off of that, I mentioned earlier that we are also having an event on July 1st on balancing hormones and stress and gut health naturally. So I think if you are having hormonal issues, I think that would be really good for you to attend that. And so then another question that I see is, so someone said, some of my clients take ibuprofen to sleep and swear by it. How does it help them?
I'm not a medic, so I'm not quite sure of the treatment pathways. The only thing I do know is that it's not great for the gut, and is definitely not recommended to be taken long term.
Okay. And then another thing is, so actually, we kind of talked about this, but not really, but something that we talked about before was debunking the 8-hour myth. And this is something that also somebody else was asking, is how many hours of sleep is enough for an adult? So if you can kind of touch back on that a little bit, that'd be great.
So when we talk about sleep, we talk about quality and quantity. And if you're having 9 hours of poor quality sleep, so you're not getting into deep sleep, you will feel less rested than if you've had 6 hours of good quality sleep where you've got deep sleep. So it really is quality over quantity. Now, the recommendation for adults is 7 to 9 hours. So I suppose that's where the 8 hour, it's in the middle, comes from. But definitely we tend to see people are around the sort of 7.5 hours. But people do come in and they're really worried, I'm not getting 8 hours sleep. And it's like, well, don't worry about it. Have you ever got 8 hours sleep? And they'll say, no. Well, don't worry about it then, because that's this idea of this perfect amount of sleep that we need to get is just, it's personal. It's really personal. So it's all about good quality sleep. So consistent. So if you're able to stay asleep, I would say for at least 5 to 6 hours, that's good sleep. Thing is, you may be slightly aware, you may sort of turn over, because we come up into quite light sleep, you may be slightly aware of what's going on, but actually that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that consolidated first half of the night. That's the important bit, because quite often people will say, I go to bed at 11, I fall asleep and I'm awake between 3 and 4 a.m. But actually we're doing well because we've got that really consolidated deep sleep phase.
Okay.
We do need more than that, but that's what we're looking for.
Okay. I think that was also someone else's question as well. And then what about taking a nap? Does that say that we have a routine and then, we're feeling tired and then we choose to take a nap? Would that disrupt the routine? And should naps be avoidable if we're trying to build a routine? Can that affect?
So the way to think about it's so difficult, isn't it? Because we're trying to cover enough of the details so what I'm saying makes sense.
I know there's so much.
So quick fire. We have two things in the body. We have a circadian rhythm, which is our internal clock. And then we have something that's called sleep pressure. And these things work together. So our circadian rhythm determines the timing of our sleep, and our sleep pressure is what builds up to push us to go to sleep. If we nap, then we are reducing our sleep pressure. So I'm very pro napping. I think it's great, especially if you're a shift worker. If you've got no problems with sleep, I have no problem whatsoever with a 20-30 minute nap between 1 and 4 p.m. No problem. But if you have problems getting to sleep, taking a nap could reduce your sleep pressure, which will make it harder to go to sleep that night. But for example, if you're older, it may be that you get 5 hours sleep at night, because when we're older, we get less deep sleep. But actually, it may work for you to have a 2-hour nap in the afternoon to top up.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with timing is, what I will say to people is, don't sleep. If you're just looking for a refresh, don't go past half an hour, because what you don't want to do is get into deep sleep, because you'll feel rubbish when you come around from that. But if you're really going to go for it, allow a couple of hours so that you can allow your system to have a full sleep cycle, so that hopefully you don't come up out of deep sleep. Because if you wake from deep sleep, the whole thing is void. It's not worth it. But never nap after 4 p.m. because that will affect your sleep pressure.
And caffeine. When is the last time to stop drinking caffeine?
Well, again, if you're sensitive to caffeine, and you're likely to know that you are, because you might feel a bit jittery, then I would say, again, 3 o'clock. But it's really tricky because people do build up tolerance to caffeine. And there was a really interesting study done, I think it's in the US a couple of years ago, where researchers got the same coffee from the same coffee shop for a week. And the amount of caffeine in that same coffee varied from 300 milligrams per cup to 500. So if you've then had 2 of those a day, you're way, you've blown your caffeine content out of the water. Mm-hmm. And then the half-life of caffeine, I mean, that takes sort of 6 to 8 hours to go through the system. Mm-hmm. So you have to really think about quantity and timing of caffeine. I don't have a problem with caffeine in the morning. I mean, it's not the world's most abused drug for nothing. It's really effective. It's really good at what it does. But too much caffeine will affect sleep. But again, there are some people who can drink caffeine 24 hours a day, and it's never a problem.
Yeah, so fascinating. I find myself being very sensitive to it. So I kind of have to be one of the ones that kind of avoids it. And then there's also a few questions on sleep apnea. So do you have any recommendations on treatment for that?
Yeah, I mean, the treatment, so if you were coming into our clinic, you would come in and you would do a sleep study where you're wired up and overnight, and they test movement, they test breathing. There's a whole range of things that get tested. It's called polysomnography. There's also a one you can do, I think, at home overnight as well. Treatment classically is a CPAP machine, which is a device that goes over the face, which blows air through and opens the airway, because it's the airway that's closing that's causing the obstruction. So CPAP is very effective. For some people, there is a surgical route that can be helpful. For some people in our clinic, they will come in and they will have a jaw piece fitted and made because that can sometimes help open the jaw. Because sleep apnea comes from multiple different things. Classically, if you're overweight, there is a higher risk. As we age, where there's risk because the muscles are not as tight, not as strong, so they relax. So that could be it. It could be genetic shape of the jaw, which means when you lie back, your tongue is falling back into your airway. So there's multiple reasons, but there's multiple treatments. But for us, we work with the mouth guard and CPAP. But also I recommend sleeping on your side, because if you're on your side, you're less likely to fall back and to fall backwards. So it's also really important to avoid nicotine and alcohol, because these are relaxants again, which make the process worse. So I do always recommend, if you suspect apnea, getting tested and getting it treated, because the difference to quality of life can be really significant if you get on top of that.
Okay. Thank you so much for answering that. And I know we're at time now, but I'm going to ask one more question, if that's okay. So somebody's asking, there were a few questions of this as well. What about feeling guilty about sleeping? Have you ever had clients where that has?
Yeah, I mean that's a big one. It's a really interesting question. Feeling guilty for sleeping. I mean, we could sit here for ages to unpick, well, what's going on there? Biologically, sleep is essential, absolutely essential. So it's a big question to get into. Why do you feel guilty for biological necessity?
Yeah.
What's going on in your environment that is causing that?
Yeah, it's interesting. But there's so many different tools, and if there's one tool that you could recommend, what would that be?
Getting up at the same time every day, getting as much light and getting a boogie on. So literally you get up, put some music on, all the lights, all the windows open, everything, and move. Light, movement, and getting up at the same time. It's completely free.
Very good, very good. Amazing. Thank you so much, Heather. Well, I feel like this went so fast.
Yeah.
It went so fast. Oh my gosh. All right. So I'm going to send the links to Heather's website as well as her book. I think, let me know if those links don't work. I can try and send it out again. But yes, this is her book. Please tell us about it.
This is my book. So the book, and looking at the questions that are here in the chat, the way the book came around, it's about 200 questions that I get asked every day in my work. So I really come from an ethos of explaining how stuff works, because if we know how stuff works, we know what to do with it. So the book is a collection of those questions. Some are very science-based, some are utterly random, like does the magnetic field affect where you put your bed in the room? Does listening to ASMR help me improve my sleep? ASMR, by the way, I find it very odd that people like to listen to people talking into microphones. Yeah, 20% of people in the world, it turns out, experience this incredible thing that it's great. So it is around 200 answers to all the questions you would want to ask about sleep from an evidence-based perspective, and it's also very visual. So it's a very pictorial version of how to look at sleep. And I know that it's available globally, so it comes out in next 3rd of June. It comes out. So yeah.
Very exciting. And I'll put the link again in the chat just in case anybody missed it. Great. And then also for all of your questions, this has been recorded. So I will send the replay out to all of you either tomorrow or Monday, as well as the podcast version. So you can listen to it on iTunes or Spotify as well. Or you can watch a video version and watch our faces all over again.
But I would say as well, because there's a lot of questions in the chat, please do feel free to get in contact via my website. I'm very happy to answer questions if I can.
Thank you. Thank you so much for offering that. And then again, if you'd like to check out more of the project that I'm working on and the platform that I'm developing, as well as future events, you can go to the website zayamed.com. Again, we'll be changing the name from Zaya to Lua. So it'll be luahealth.com, but I'll send you the new domain after in the next email that I send out. So thank you so much once again, everyone, for attending and all of your questions. And I really hope that this was helpful for you. And yes, I hope to see all of you at the next event, the Meditation and Mindfulness Circle, for people who have chronic pain and are hoping to use more mindfulness and meditation to help manage your chronic pain. And then also, it's just a really great way to come in and join us and do a nice little 15-minute meditation. So you are more than welcome to join that. All right. And then, yes, you can go to the link here. Sorry, I see that. You can just go there and then go to events, and then it'll take you to Eventbrite again, and you can register it from there. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Looking forward to meditation one.
Beautiful. Can't wait to see you there.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 You guys are all amazing.
California here.
Oh, hey, California.
So will you be sending us out an invite to the meditation one?
Yes, I can. So in the email, I will send an invite to the meditation and mindfulness circle, and then also the one that's coming up in July as well on balancing hormones, stress, and gut health. So yeah, I'll send that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you from Vancouver.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye from Ireland.
Bye, Ireland.
Sayonara, Arrivederci, Warkupa, Shalom. Good luck. Have a nice day. Have a nice, good luck.
Bye, Julio.
Yeah. I appreciate your webinar. Very nice in order to learn more. Thank you for your advice. Thank you for everything, Good luck. Shalom.
Bye. Thank you.
Have to work, okay?
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I appreciate your presentation. Very nice. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. Bye-bye. Good luck.
Oh, thank you. Bye, Julio. Thank you for coming. So
Bye-bye.
sweet. All right. Any other questions in the chat? I'm still just looking at the chat.
From Honduras. Yeah. Honduras.
Honduras.
Yeah.
Hola.
I am from Honduras. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you so much for coming. And then for Fatima.
I go back to work. Okay.
Okay.
See you next time.
Enjoy work. See you next time.
Yeah.
Fatima, I put the link to the book, to Heather's book in there as well. Okay, perfect. All right. I'm going to close the chat now. All right. See you all next time. Bye.